Buying an RV could be the biggest mistake you make in your life. Let me explain. The techs replaced the rails, which are right up here on both sides of that slide out. On that slide out, there was a rail at the top and a rail at the bottom. It was called a double rail system. After the Thor techs finished repairing the slide out on that Palazzo, it left some black trim where they had to rivet the Schwintek system back onto the sidewall of that Palazzo. Now, mind you, these Palazzos have beautiful paint. Thor Motor Coach really uses great paint on these motorhomes. At least they did back in the day. I don't know what they use now, but they used Sickens paint, and they did a very good paint scheme on these lower end cheap RVs, cheap motorhomes. So I think the beautiful paint just had me and my wife blindsided. I mean, you know, we're thinking, oh, we're getting a beautiful coach that looks pretty, but we had no idea what was in store for us, literally. So let me get back to this black strip of aluminum that was on the outside of the motorhome. When they replaced the Schwintek system, it was black. But from the factory, when they paint these motorhomes, they paint over that black piece of trim, or that black piece of aluminum. So when the slide outs are open, you've got paint all the way up to the edge of the slide out. So I told Camping World, I said, if you cannot make this motorhome, if you cannot fix it the way it was at the factory, I want it fixed like it came from the factory. I'm not going to have it. I'm not going to have it. I'm not taking it home. You can keep it. There's no way. So by this time, the general manager was involved. Thor Motor Coach was involved. It became a huge mess. So one thing led to another. Thor Motor Coach and Camping World decided to send the motorhome to a paint shop that was about 50 miles away. There's only one paint shop in my area in another town over 50 miles away that can paint these motorhomes or have a paint booth big enough to put these in to paint them. That Palazzo sat at that paint shop for almost 4 months. We were making payments on a motorhome that was not in our possession for almost 4 months. While that Palazzo was at the paint shop over 50 miles away, I was on the phone with Thor Motor Coach toward the end of the 4 months. About 3 months into it, I had already had enough, because I'd kept on calling trying to find out when my motorhome would be finished, and they just kept on telling me it's still in line, we've not got the paint for it yet, we're still trying to get the paint. And then finally they said, oh, it's moved into the paint booth, we're trying to get it painted. You know, there was issue after issue after issue. During the whole time, I was very vocal on social media. I was on rv.net, which is Good Sam now, I think, and I was on IRV2, which are RV forums. Obviously the Good Sam one is the Camping World one, and IRV2 is an independent forum for RVs. I was so vocal and so upset at the whole situation because I felt like Camping World was not doing anything for me. I felt like Thor Motor Coach was not doing anything for me, because every time I called, I got empty promises, more delays, more excuses. Nobody would help us. It had gotten to the point where I had considered hiring an attorney. I gave Camping World my intentions on what I was about to do, and the general manager at the local Camping World told me that if I hire an attorney, there's nothing else they can do for me. We will not be able to talk to you anymore, nor will Thor Motor Coach be able to talk to you. I decided at that point, if I could not sue them for, you know, all this money we just spent on an RV, which we've not owned, which we've not took home for 4 months. I had pretty much made up my mind that I was going to make everyone's life a living HE double hockey sticks. And I did. Believe it or not, there was not much social media back in the end of 2013. There was Facebook and there were some other things. There was YouTube, and I started finding a few YouTube channels with the same issues that I had on my Palazzo and Schwintek. But really, the largest outlets for complaints were the forums, and that was IRV2 and RV.net. I had gotten so vocal on those channels that on RV.net, which is a Good Sam forum owned by Camping World, I think they still are, I'm not sure, but they were owned by Camping World back in the day, I finally got a response from the Marcus Lemonis response team. So now I was finally on the Camping World radar, so to speak. On IRV2, I posted numerous pictures of all the issues I was having with my Schwintek slide outs. IRV2 started to remove my posts. I really didn't understand why IRV2 was removing my posts, because I was being cordial I was not being bad-mouthed. I was basically stating the truth of all the issues I was having with my Palazzo, but they still removed my posts. I think the reason why IRV2 removed my posts is because they were either being sponsored by, RV manufacturers, and they just didn't want to hear it. They didn't want to hear no part of it. We finally got that Palazzo back. We brought the motorhome back home. At that time, I successfully got about 4 operations on that slide out before it failed again, just like it did the first time, before they replaced all the components on that Schwintek slide out. By this point, as you can imagine, I had already had enough. I was not going to take it anymore. I was not interested in keeping that RV. I didn't want any part of it. Me and my wife both took off work, and I drove that motorhome back to our camping world. My wife was in our SUV pulling a trailer behind it. I pulled that motorhome into the parking lot of that camping world, and she pulled up in the SUV. In the parking lot of that camping world, I started to remove everything we had inside that RV and load our trailer up and load our SUV up with it right there in the parking lot of the camping world. The salesman that had originally sold us that Palazzo, he came out and he's like, "What are y'all doing?" "I'm unloading this Palazzo. I don't want it anymore." And he was like, "Hold on, we can work this out." I'm like, "No, you've already tried to work it out. There's no more working it out. There's nothing you can do." So then the sales manager comes out of the camping world. He comes over there, sees what we're doing, and he's like, you can't do this." I said, "No, I can." Now remind you, this was the sales manager, not the GM of that camping world. So the sales manager was there. He's like, "Y'all can't unload your RV in our parking lot." And so I was like, "What do you expect me to do with it? I can't use the RV. It's not fixed. Y'all have to fix it. Y'all have to do something. I can't take it like this. The slide out doesn't work. It's broke." He said, "Okay, fine. Just do whatever you're going to do, and we'll take it back, in their storage lot." At the time, the sales manager didn't really know what my intent was, but my intent is to give them back this RV and never bring it home again. When we got done unloading our Palazzo in the Camping World parking lot, I took all the keys that were with that motorhome, similar to these, and I took those keys and I walked right into that Camping World. I stepped into the doorway of the general manager's office, and I took those keys right there and I threw them on his desk, and his hands are sitting right there, and it landed right between his hands. That manager told me, "You don't want to do this." I said, "Watch me." I said, "What do you mean I don't want to do this?" There's some things he said in that conversation that I was flabbergasted he would even say. But nonetheless, me and my wife, we walked out of that camping world, and we never saw that Palazzo again. Never saw it again. I don't know what they did with it. I don't know if they resold it. I don't know if they sent it back to the factory. I have no clue what happened to that Palazzo, but we never saw it again. So several weeks had went by since the day we dropped the keys off at Camping World. I think by that point, Camping World was done with it, and they were just having me deal directly with Thor Motor Coach. So I was on the phone for several weeks, off and on, with Thor Motor Coach. And even back in 2014, trying to get hold of someone over there is just next to impossible. I mean, trying to get hold of somebody who is in charge or someone who can make a decision. Because every time they called me, it was just empty promises, excuses, you name it. Meanwhile, I was still very vocal on social media. I started at that time making posts on Facebook and various groups that had popped up back at the end of 2013, the beginning of 2014. And I still complained on RV.net. Interestingly enough, Camping World never removed my posts, which to this day I still don't understand why they didn't, because I mean I was complaining a lot. And IRV2, which I don't even know if they're associated with a particular brand, but I think they do get advertisement from various RV manufacturers. The Marcus Lemonis response team, I got one call from them, and they said that they were going to do whatever they can to make me happy. So finally, Thor Motor Coach called me after about 3 weeks. So I think by the time I dropped those keys off at Camping World, it was another month before I started to get any traction out of Thor Motor Coach. The Thor Motor Coach made me an offer. They said, "Here's what we're going to do. We've got another Palazzo. It's a 2014 33.2, same color, same everything, just like the one that you purchased. We're going to send it down to North Carolina. We're going to send it to Camping World, and when it gets there, you can go through it, make sure you're happy with it, and we'll call it a done deal. Me and my wife had concerns about Thor Motor Coach sending that Palazzo to North Carolina during the winter of 2014. Now, some folks are familiar with that time frame. The Midwest and the eastern United States had one of the largest polar vortexes ever to hit the United States. Well, guess what? Thor Motor Coach had that motorhome delivered in the largest blizzard in just about the history of the United States. So guess what happened? They wrecked the thing on its way to North Carolina. Camping World called me up the day that motorhome got down here, and they said, hey, we've got your motorhome, but there's a problem. I kid you not, you can't make this up. The sales manager said, there's been a problem, but you need to come get your motorhome. So we had no idea what the problem was. He wouldn't tell me over the phone. So me and my wife, we drove over to the Camping World, and there sat that motorhome in the front of their parking lot. The front of it was torn all to pieces, wrecked. And they thought we were going to take that motorhome home. They drove that motorhome to North Carolina from Indiana in the largest polar vortex we have ever seen, and wrecked the thing into a snowbank. And it tore the front cap slam off of that motorhome. The driver's side had a gap in it, and fiberglass was torn all to pieces off of that motorhome. And they thought we were going to take that motorhome away from there. We didn't. We turned right back around and left, and I was on the phone with Thor Motor Coach again. I explained the situation to Thor Motor Coach, and I said, y'all going to buy this motorhome back. We're done with it. We're not going to have no more of it. I'm done. Y'all can do whatever you want to do, but I'm done. That's about how that conversation went down. So another 2 or 3 weeks went by. Guys, mind you, we're making payments on the motorhome we've not had for about 6 months now. I kid you not. And this is the same story that I'm hearing over and over and over. Obviously, mine was very extreme, but when I go to these YouTube channels and watch the horror stories in 2024, where people are still having issues with their motorhomes, it just blows my mind.